Hello, what lurks beneath. Facebook werewolf story here again. Sorry it's taking me so long to write you my real-life experiences. All I can say is that there are a lot of people in this world that typically clam up and hide traumatic experiences easily, especially if it was far out of the ordinary. Some just have one bad experience, and they can't even talk about it, causing them to have PTSD for the rest of their lives. And as I've told you, I've had many supernatural experiences. Some good, but mostly bad. I'm tired of living with it alone inside. I have this need to dump the baggage. Finding you and being able to freely and anonymously share my life experiences has helped me in some ways. Just finding it difficult to pull it out into words. Thanks again for sharing my letters to your audience. If they can learn something, that is very satisfying. I will write you more in the future. Just takes a lot to dig out. So sorry for the procrastination. This was a long time ago, at the beginning of my life, in the 1970s, back when I was about 4 or 5. My family and I lived on Delisle Avenue in Roosevelt, New York. My parents had 5 daughters and me. On one occasion, my step-grandmother paid us a visit, along with my dad's father. It was a nice visit. But before she left behind a gift to my sisters. My parents did not know about it. For my sisters, we will use pseudonyms. Oldest to youngest is Diane, Carrie, Tina, Ada, Sarah, and myself, who came along 7 years after the youngest girl. After our grandparents left, Carrie and Tina, being the most rebellious of us, went down into the basement with the board. We lived in a simple one-level home with an attic and a basement. I was not involved, being so young at the time, but apparently they played with the Ouija board, asking it questions, and I happily was replying, quickly answering all their questions. It didn't take long, though, for them being only 14 and 16 to get a little freaked out about the supernatural movements and feelings they were getting from the board, and the negative energy change in the room. So, they put it up somewhere, hiding it in the basement. Carrie and Ada slept in one of the rooms of the basement, sharing it, having twin beds. One bed at one end of the room, and the other at the other end. That night, they went to sleep. About 3 a.m. or so, Ada woke up to the sounds of loud banging against the wall. They always kept a nightlight on, and she looked over and could clearly see Carrie partially lifted in the bed, getting her head banged against the wall, as though some invisible being, very strong, had had its hands gripping both sides of her head and violently moving her head back and forth against the wall. Ada screamed, ran to get Mom. At that time, my father was not there since he was an over-the-road truck driver. My mom, after frantically being told about what happened, lit a candle, grabbed her Bible, and went downstairs. Carrie was crying profusely, but at least the attack had stopped. My mom had opened the Bible, read some passages and prayers over the room. After finding out what all took place from the girls, since everybody was now awake, she took the Ouija board and broke it, trashed it. I know a lot of people will say that it will come back, but it never did. In my opinion, from later experiences, I believe that whatever that being was did not originate through the board, but use of the board awakened something that was already there. This was not an old Ouija board, from what I've heard. I think our step-grandmom brought it brand new, as just novelty. So it's possible the board had nothing really attached to it yet, since not being frequently used. I think from what I've learned over the years, is it's the old ones that you really have to worry about. I believe those kinds should not only be prayed over, but specifically asked to close the portal to it. Then, anointed with blessed oil, preferably olive oil, so nothing gets released during the burning. Another thing I had heard frequently over the years in that neighborhood was either near or built on an ancient native burial ground. Just behind that particular street, it's quite woodsy, with a drainage creek. My friends and I used to go back there, catch frogs. It always seemed back in those trees it was a little darker, perhaps heavier there, but not so much that we were scared to play. So with that being said, I think what happened after, and many tumultuous years onward, was the result of waking something up, drawing the attention of something that was already there, not tied to the board. Strange things occurred, things being moved or missing, fights and arguments over crazy accusations amongst the girls. I remember it being so nice, peaceful, and loving in our home till that time. Then it just seemed like all hell had broken loose. One time, Tina and Ada got into such a bad fight that Tina actually stabbed Ada in the arm with a wire hanger. Sarah often bullied me and beat me up often. If she got caught, my mom beat her. Then, my mom got into it often with the girls, and everybody argued all the time, because she's become so callous, like the woman in the movie, Mommy Dearest. Dad would come home and become insanely jealous, always thinking my mother was cheating on him. It was like living with Mr. from The Color Purple. Such a radical personality change. They started fighting all the time. He even got drunk one night and shot bullets off into one of the closets of my sister Tina's room, on the main level, just after Carrie moved us younger ones from hiding in that closet to under the bed. One night, the fights got so bad, my sister put me outside the window at night and told me to go to the neighbors. I was in my underwear, and it was the middle of winter. Apparently, I blacked it out, but my sister Ada recounted the incident to me. Apparently, I was on the back doorstep of the neighbors all night, since they never woke to let me in, and the chaos, they forgot about me till morning. Somehow I survived without any side effects like frostbite or anything. As we got older, things seemed to die down a bit, but every now and then, things would always kick off explosively, like every 6 months or so. One time, a year or so after my sister Tina had a child out of wedlock, but afterward, did marry the guy, my dad got drunk, shot up the house, and shot at my sister, and just missed. Her husband fled already, because he knew my dad hated him. I was just 9 at the time, but came out my room to talk him down. He calmed down. The police arrived, but of course, Mom bailed him out. Another time, they got into a really bad fight, and my mom cut his back open. Things were different back then. The laws and such, so we were able to get the charges dropped after he got stitched up. One time, one of my dad's trucker friends came by and spent the night in the basement. Around the middle of the night, we all woke to hear the man screaming at the top of his lungs in the basement. We heard him running up the stairs shortly after, like a stampeding elephant. This big, strong black man is huge, like the refrigerator Perry in denim overalls. 6'3" or 6'4", close to 400 pounds. His eyes were bigger than quarters. He told my parents he was leaving immediately, that he would rather sleep in his truck than spend another second down there in that basement, that he saw a shadow figure over him, and it was strangling him in bed, and was so strong it took him a while to break free from its grip. Needless to say, he never stayed at our house ever again. Also, there were reports from others who visited and were down there seeing a shadow figure out of the corner of their eye. Most of my sisters gradually married very young, quickly moved out of the home, one by one. But one in particular, Sarah, never had any problems down there. Her being the last girl, she actually liked it down there. and made it like a little apartment for herself. But her whole outer appearance changed. She became moody and began wearing all black, constantly singing that old classic soul song, Black Butterfly. She frequently rebelled against my mother. I remember her and my other sister Tina getting physical with my mother after arguments. One time, she mouthed off and disrespected my dad, and he started choking her and pinning her down to her bed. Suddenly, she gained superhuman strength and decked my dad so hard, knocking him off of her and back onto the floor. We're talking about a small teenage girl here, maybe 5'2" at best, knocking a fully grown 250-pound man onto his backside. She took off from home for a few days after, but eventually came back. She still loves wearing black to this day. Everything. I also had an incident, which I wonder if that thing followed me to school. We were called to recess back when I was in 5th grade. I was running at full throttle towards the door, when suddenly, something as only I can describe as a strong force held my right foot down, and I went sailing into the wall to the right of the classroom door. I landed perfectly between where the wall meets the door. I was bent into an L shape. I seized up, could not breathe. I thought I was going to die. The principal and nurse ran in, began telling me to breathe over and over again, rubbing my chest, telling me to relax. I eventually caught my breath and was carried to the nurse's room. When my mom arrived, they told her I had a ripped muscle in my lower left part of my back, but I should fully recover, and that I was young and would heal up okay. I still have a dent in that area to this day. Did that thing follow me and try to kill me? Can't say for certain, but I'm 100% positive there was nobody near my right foot, or some kid tripped me, or something like that. Okay, let's get back to Sarah. After her marriage, Sarah and her husband moved around Nassau County to a few different places. My parents eventually moved with me to Florida in the 80s to develop their homestead there, about 20 acres or so. They called me their little last of the Mohicans and told me I would learn animal farming. That situation eventually turned into a hybrid script of Green Acres, Good Times, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but only the animals got massacred. No people, luckily, but that's a whole other story. Let me get back on topic. My parents decided to rent the home in New York out. After going through a few renters, my sister Tina decided to rent it. She and her husband had been separated, so she decided to stay there. But she could not afford all the rent, and Sarah and her husband decided to move back into the home. Tina moved into the basement, but after frequent arguing with Sarah and her husband, she moved out. Sarah and her husband made out fine on their own, with their 3 children. Eventually, they began having the same battles my parents had. No guns or knives ever entered the situation, thank God. But it did get physical. One time, on a visit, I witnessed her husband hit Sarah in the back of the head with a medium container of store-bought potato salad. Needless to say, she had him arrested, and she then later bailed him out. That visit was in the 90s. An incident a few years before, I believe. She snuck up on him whilst working on something in the yard, knocked him out cold with a 2x4 for putting his hands on her earlier. Years later, I flew up there in the early 2000s to visit, and I noticed my nephew would draw pictures of demons, numerous ones, different kinds, but mostly the same one with horns like a goat. I asked him why he did that. He said he saw them in his dreams. On another visit during Thanksgiving, I remember sitting at the dinner table, letting my meal settle. Everybody had gotten up, gone to their rooms, but my niece lingered. She is my sister's firstborn. She eventually sat near me and told me that she loved her mother very much, but sometimes she could be so evil towards her for no reason. She went on to say that there was also something very evil dwelling in that house. One night, she had been awakened to see an ink-black figure coming out of her closet with glowing red eyes. She said that she closed her eyes and prayed. When she reopened them, it was gone. And guess where her room was? In the basement. She never had too many problems after that, so she stayed down there and made a nice little home of it, like an apartment. She is a special girl with a glow all her own. Not just beautiful on the outside, but her heart and spirit on the inside too. She occasionally caught a shadow lurking in the corner of her eye, but nothing ever tried to attack her. She married, but it's strange because even though they should be young and fertile, like everyone else in the family, they never had children. They got tested and were found to be normal. 10 long years went by, and I believe she cried about it in prayer, and she finally got pregnant and had a little baby girl. According to African legends, the presence of some kinds of evil spirits can cause barrenness. One time, years ago, during a really bad thunder and lightning storm, there was a lot of arguing I heard going on. Lightning came down, struck the tree in the yard, splitting it, killing it, causing the house and surrounding area to rumble and shake violently. The tree had to be cut up and removed. I loved that old oak tree as a child. The front yard slanted downward the street, and that big old tree grew slanted also, covering the white wooden fence, and shaded a huge portion of the street in front of the house. I used to run right up to the branch, hanging over the fence, and sit there, looking at the sky, and letting my imagination go wild, watching all the clouds roll by. So many trees on our street, but that particular one got struck dead. Okay, fast forward to 2019. This is the climax of everything I can tell you that I think got triggered by that darn Ouija board. I had a dream one night of seeing a bushel of bluish-purple flowers. Fire exploded around it, but the flowers did not burn. I woke up, confused as to what that meant, but ended up throwing it in the back of my mental Rolodex and going to work. A week later, my sister Sarah's home in New York burnt down. Even though the outer structure held up, the interior was just gutted with fire to the rooftop, where a huge burn hole could be seen at the peak of the house in the cell phone recording and photos. At this time, the house had a second level built and a new attic since years ago. She and her husband had gotten a refinancing on the house and a home equity loan, and they put a lot of time and energy into remodeling the place. I saw her video recording as the fire practically was exploding through the front door and pulsating like it was alive. The fire department was very late, not unheard of in neighborhoods like that one in the town of Roosevelt. It took them 25 minutes or so to get there, and by then, it was way too late. My nephew woke up just in time to alert his parents, brother, and sister's family to get out of the house. They all survived, but sadly, my niece's dog died in the basement. Afterward, they had to go rent a house. She took a lot of pictures and recordings of the damage, but one picture stood out. Inside the middle of the house, in the nook, near the staircase leading up to the second story, perfectly intact and not burned on, a stand was a big vase. It was a gift to her from our step-grandmom many years ago, long before she died. And get this, the vase is decorated with bluish-purple flowers, like I saw in my dream. Was her spirit there, protecting that area in the house? Or even perhaps influenced my nephew to wake up early, getting everybody out of the home mere seconds before the house was finally engulfed in flames? I don't know. Maybe. Even though she was the one who gave my sisters the board many years ago in the first place, I really do not think she planned to deliberately cause our whole family so many serious problems. I really believe she was ignorant and the consequences of her actions back then. But perhaps she was there at the house that early morning, influencing things in a good way, acting as a guardian perhaps. I will never know for sure. Afterward, there was a short investigation into the cause of the fire, but nothing was conclusively found to be the exact cause. They did conclude one thing. The fire started, you guessed it, in the basement. I'm so glad that nobody had been killed. Sad that the dogs suffered, but that's life. And it's a good thing. A great thing circumstances didn't lead up to producing a far more worse scenario than what occurred. No tragic family funeral. One thing, though, is they had good home insurance, and the house has been replaced. My niece and nephews are back there with their kids, and doing okay. Nothing evil seems to be dwelling there anymore. Perhaps the fire purged it all away. But since the craziness hit in 2020, my sister and brother-in-law have been deciding to stay out of the New York area for now. They have a home and land and inheritance in Virginia from his father who passed. They might move there permanently, let their kids and grandkids stay in the house in Long Island. I know this was a long story, but I couldn't clarify the domino effect that was caused by screwing around with the Ouija board without telling you everything I know in connection with it. I also know that many people use Ouija boards and don't have such horrific results. Like I said earlier, the major danger here was where it was used. I believe after much learning and checking into occultic matters over the years, that the board just opened a portal, perhaps just a crack in an area where people really should not live for spiritual reasons, and something or things got through. Violating the sanctity of burial grounds doesn't always lead to the poltergeist movie type scenario, but it's wise to check the history of the land or home that you plan to move to before you move to it. This is just one of many experiences that I've witnessed in my life, and even though I'm just a truck driver, I've spent much of my spare time reading books, investigating on the net about supernatural problems, and what the average person can do to fight back when faced with terrifying situations, such as this one. In my opinion, after reading and studying, as soon as a problem occurred in the home, it should have been blessed. In every single room, with all the closets and cabinets open, and make sure your home is clean as a whistle beforehand. If you can't get a pastor or a priest, but you are a believer, you can just pray over the rooms yourself with a good book in hand, whilst asking for all the evil in your home to leave, with the windows open too. Make sure you specify in your prayer to request to close all portals in your home and on your land. Afterwards, you could light up incense or even a scented candle, because evil spirits hate fragrant scents. I would even go the extra mile and pray over some olive oil a touch, and put it on the window frames and door frames afterward. Remember, too, that if you want evil gone from your home, you and your family must not partake in evil. That can cause what you ask to come and help to withdraw from, and the evil can come back, with more help, I might add. There are many different things you can do, but these are the most simple that I know of. Never be afraid to talk to people you think might be able to help. Nasty situations, such as I've discussed, are very hard to deal with and should be avoided at all costs, being dealt with alone. Always seek help if at all possible. I've faced things like this before, alone, and I can tell you from my experience, doing spiritual warfare alone is dangerous and can sometimes turn out deadly. Entities can do and put their hands on you if they have an opening, and can see whether you are truly protected or not. There's an old film called The Entity, which is based on a true story. Very violent and very physical. All of it is documented. I hope should you read this entire account, that it helps somebody in your audience. That is my greatest hope by telling this story. If you can reach just one person. I have more stories to tell you as promised. I will share them with you over time. This telling took a lot out of me, and it might be a while before I send you another. Again, to you and your audience, take care, be safe, and as always, pay attention to your instincts when looking for a home. Never ignore your gut feelings. And for the love of God, please, 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 never give or allow your children to play with Ouija boards.